Early morning at California National Cemetery, a thin mist lay over the hallowed ground like a soft shawl. Beneath the ancient oak's wide canopy, rows of black-draped chairs stood in perfect alignment. The soldier's family sat motionless beside the flag-draped casket at the ceremony center. A young child in a diminutive uniform occupied the front row, looking intently at the folded stars and stripes. The adults adjusted service ribbons and polished medals, their faces solemn in the hush that precedes a military funeral. No one spoke. Even a quiet cough felt out of place. Suddenly, a black SUV rolled silently through a side gate. Its engine barely whispered against the still air. The rear door opened, and a woman in a crisp four-star general's uniform stepped out, clutching a small urn wrapped in black cloth. Those nearby rose without hesitation, snapping to attention as they saluted the General Marissa Oakwood, whose reputation for bravery and honor was known throughout the Pentagon. Yet a single man remained seated. Garrett Langford, the cemetery's perimeter security officer, stood rigid at his post. In a swift, unexpected motion, he slapped both palms onto the SUV's hood, the sharp crack of his hand echoing through the silent gathering. The sound reverberated like a sudden shout, shattering the ceremony's reverent calm. Soldiers in their dress blues froze mid-step. The child in uniform blinked up at his mother, who kept her head bowed, holding tight to her mourning cloth. General Oakwood did not flinch. She paused a heartbeat, her steady gaze moving from Langford's palm still pressed against the polished hood up to his cold gray eyes. The ceremony's gravity teetered on that moment. This was supposed to be a tribute to a fallen hero, yet here was an act of raw contempt intruding upon devotion and grief. In the hush that followed, all understood a single truth: a funeral meant for honor had been disrupted by an unmistakable act of intolerance. Early morning light revealed the tension on the gravel path as the security officer stepped directly into General Oakwood's path. His bemused smirk hardened into contempt as he planted both hands on the SUV's hood, a second time enough to make the black lacquer ripple under his palms. The small American flag draped over the casket swayed imperceptibly, at first, then more noticeably, as if startled by his intrusion. All eyes remained fixed, unwilling to break the reverent silence. Without so much as a flinch, Oakwood drew her identification card from a slim leather wallet. She held it level with her stern gaze, giving everyone a clear view of the embossed seal and her rank 4 silver stars gleaming in the morning light. Langford leaned forward, peering as if he suspected the gold foil was a clever forgery. "Another fake, I suppose," he sneered, voice low enough that only those seated closest could hear. "They make them real convincing these days." No one dared contradict him. A young flag bearer's hands trembled. The ceremonial staff slipped, and the wooden pole clattered against the stone walkway. The sound echoed through the circle of mourners, sharp as a dropped rifle, and the child in the front row gasped softly. Langford shrugged in triumph, convinced he had sown doubt about the uniformed woman's authority. Oakwood did not flinch. She took one deliberate step closer to the casket, her grip never wavering from the urn she carried. The sun glinted off her service ribbons. Neither pride nor fear flickered in her steel-gray eyes. Langford, his voice turned harsh. "You don't belong in this zone. No one invited you. If you step forward, it's a serious breach of protocol." He spoke as if he alone represented the law. Oakwood's expression remained unyielding. She did not raise her voice. Instead, she let the morning hush deepen around her. In the silent standoff, her mere presence, upright, calm, and unshakable, answered far louder than any words. The tension stretched taut like a drawn bowstring as the security officer stepped forward, planting himself between General Oakwood and the flag-draped casket. His hand shot out, snatching the identification card from her grasp and flinging it to the ground. The card's embossed seal left a smear of red across the polished wood, a cruel reminder of his contempt. No one dared breathe. The mourners sat frozen, their faces etched with helplessness beneath the oak's dappled shade. Suddenly, a rustle came from the edge of the ceremonial area, where a journalism student had crept close. He raised his phone and began filming live. Langford turned his head just enough to catch the glare of the screen. "Go on, keep rolling," he taunted, voice flat. "What's the use of all this ceremony if you're not going to show everyone the real show?" His lips curled into a sneer as he mouthed to the camera. "Cop interrogates a 4-star general live during a funeral." The student's phone wavered in midair, its screen flickering as the red-bannered headline pulsed on a military forum for all to see. General Oakwood remained perfectly still, her posture unwavering, her eyes locked on Langford as with unbroken resolve. She held the urn before her like a shield, her uniform crisp, the sun casting a halo of light around her silver braid. Nearby, the young flag-bearer's hands trembled. He blinked rapidly as if trying to clear a nightmare from his vision. "This can't be happening," he whispered to the soldier beside him, voice shaking. But it was happening. Langford's arrogance had laid bare the funeral's solemnity, and yet Oakwood did not flinch. In that charged silence, she stood as a living testament to dignity under fire, proving more in her quiet courage than any raised voice ever could. As soon as the live video spread online, a storm of outrage erupted. Military forums lit up with the footage research institutes fielded, urgent inquiries, and social media buzzed with questions. What authority is this officer claiming? Who gave him the right to block a general? Within minutes, the security management team from the nearby base arrived without sirens or fanfare. Dressed in tactical gear, two agents moved swiftly through the silent throng. Without warning, they approached Langford, ordered him to lower his weapon, and escorted him into a secure transport cage. There was no dramatic confrontation, no civilian backup, no blaring alarms, only the hushed command, "Drop your weapon." The flag-draped casket remained undisturbed at the ceremony's center, while the proceedings ground to a halt. The mourners watched in stunned silence as Langford's footsteps echoed across the manicured lawn, fading away beyond the cemetery gates. In that moment, the urn in Oakwood's arms became more than a vessel of ashes. It transformed into a symbol of solemn justice. The funeral intended to honor a fallen soldier now carried a heavier meaning, a reminder that valor and honor transcend rank and privilege. As Langford exited the grounds under quiet guard, the bereaved families and uniformed officers looked to Oakwood for reassurance. She stood unmoving, her gaze calm, yet resolute, protecting both the urn and the legacy it represented. In the sudden stillness, the cemetery seemed to wait no longer. Just a place for farewell, but a testament to the principle that true respect cannot be barricaded by authority, and that dignity, once challenged, will ultimately prevail. News of the officer aiming at a general quickly escaped the confines of social media and spilled onto television screens, front pages, and political talk shows across the nation. Suddenly, Marissa Oakwood's storied career was thrust back into the spotlight. A four-star general who had led 3 combat units personally orchestrated the rescue of 18 American soldiers from a rebel prison camp in Kandahar, including the son of a Virginia senator who had previously opposed military diversity and twice saved lives under enemy fire. Archival photographs of her kneeling in a firefight bandaging wounded troops were reprinted by the New York Times, reminding the public of the sacrifices she endured overseas. Viewers and readers alike asked, how can someone who risked her life for this country be disregarded on its most hallowed soil? As the hashtag #FuneralGrenade climbed to the top of global trending lists, elected officials found themselves on opposing sides. Some demanded a full, transparent investigation into Garrett Langford's actions and the chain of command that allowed them, while others defended Langford's right to protect the ceremony. The debate reached a crescendo when the senator's own son, now serving in the Navy in Hawaii, took to Twitter with a simple, impassioned plea, "Dad, she saved me from a landmine in Afghanistan. Stop defending the indefensible." His tweet went viral, putting additional heat on lawmakers who had been sympathetic to Langford's authority argument. Overnight, urban talk radio, cable news panels, and editorial pages were filled with discussions of honor sacrifice and institutional failure. Communities that once saw Oakwood as just another high-ranking officer now realized they had overlooked her humanity. Families of fallen soldiers, veterans, and everyday citizens demanded answers. How had a uniform so steeped in valor been invalidated by a single swipe of derision? In living rooms from coast to coast, grandparents and grandchildren watched footage of Oakwood standing firm and asked themselves whether America truly understood the meaning of service. In that moment, the country grappled not only with the specifics of one officer's misconduct, but with the broader question of how to honor those who devote their lives to protecting others, even when they stand in quiet defiance. Just days later, Langford was formally indicted for impeding a general within a federally protected ceremonial zone, and the Department of Justice moved swiftly to open a full investigation. Authorities concluded that his actions constituted a grave human rights violation and an affront to the nation's honor. Langford was escorted to a federal detention center, while Marissa Oakwood remained resolutely silent in public. Reporters and editorial boards clamored for her to break her silence, but she sent only a brief letter to the DOJ stating, I will testify not as a victim. That cold, unadorned declaration rippled through the media and left the country unsettled. In the days that followed, dozens of former generals and senior officers, many of whom had served alongside Oakwood, sent a joint letter to Congress, demanding that the trial be held in open court. If a four-star general is denied the right to stand beside her fallen comrade at Arlington, they wrote, we must look to the very heart of our armed forces and question its soul. Meanwhile, Langford's name began to shift in the public imagination. No longer merely the campus security officer, he became a symbol of moral failure and institutional decay. Television newscasts replayed the footage of him blocking Oakwood's path, accompanied by commentary from legal scholars who spoke of desecration of a sacred right and betrayal of military values. Editorial columns ran side by side, one urging compassion for a man who may have believed he was following orders, the other insisting that no badge can justify pointing a weapon at service and sacrifice. Across social media platforms, veterans shared their own stories of witnessing or enduring bias, and a swell of grassroots petitions called for sweeping reform of ceremonial security protocol. In living rooms and community centers, neighbors debated whether Langford's indictment would be enough to restore faith in the system, or if it would expose a deeper rot requiring more than a courtroom verdict to heal. By the end of that week, one thing was clear. Langford's gun had become the unlikely catalyst, forcing America to confront the true meaning of honor, duty, and justice, even within its own hallowed grounds. The trial opened in Federal Courtroom Number 3 in Washington, D.C., under a heavy hush that seemed to echo in every corner of the room. The prosecutor stood and laid out a clear, unyielding case. Garrett Langford had accumulated at least 8 internal complaints against him, reports of racial bias, witness, intimidation, and even tampering with security camera footage. One by one, these documents were read into the record, each phrase more damning than the last. A former colleague, Lieutenant Frederick Hale, took the stand next. With a steady voice, he recalled how year after year Langford's wrongdoing was covered up. We were instructed to look the other way. Whenever complaints came in, Hale testified, eyes downcast. Our orders were simple: ignore anything that might rock the boat. When the courtroom clerk read aloud a memo that bluntly declared Langford as dangerous but useful, the air itself seemed to grow colder. Men and women in uniform shifted uneasily in their seats, and some elderly spectators pressed their hands together as if in prayer. When asked to speak, Langford offered no denial. Instead, he leaned forward and admitted almost casually, I only carried out what others wanted, things they were too afraid to do themselves. The judge, a stern-faced jurist appointed years earlier, refused to hide his disbelief. Behind him, portraits of past justices gazed down, reminding everyone that this was not merely a personal failing, but a betrayal of higher ideals. The charges were read in full: unlawful discharge of a weapon in a federally protected ceremonial zone, abuse of power, dishonoring a service member, and violating basic human rights. The prosecutor closed with a grave observation: Mr. Langford is not an isolated bad apple. He is the product of a system that condoned his silence and ours. Murmurs rippled through the pews. In that moment, everyone present understood this trial would test not only one man's actions, but the integrity of the entire institution meant to safeguard honor. During testimony, Langford faced Oakwood directly, his voice cold as ice. You can shoot well, he sneered, but you can't stand having a gun pointed at you. Oakwood said nothing. Instead, she unfolded an old operational map and tapped the Kunduz region of Afghanistan. I was ambushed there, she replied quietly. No backup, no satellite support, but I still rescued 6 men, including a senator's son. Her calm reminder of real sacrifice cut through the courtroom. Other evidence piled on relentlessly. Langford had once held a 10-year-old black boy face down on a North Carolina playground, with plastic zip ties, and internal complaints about his behavior were systematically ignored. A former subordinate even testified, he slapped me in an elevator simply because I didn't stand at attention. The litany of incidents wove together like a tightening rope around Langford's neck. He was no longer a dedicated officer, but someone who ruled by fear. After 13 long days, the jury retired to deliberate. Across the nation, hundreds of letters had flooded the court. Veterans, retired generals, and families of fallen soldiers, all echoing the same plea. If she could not be protected, then none of us matter. In the hushed courtroom, every heart seemed to hold its breath. When the foreperson finally returned, the judge asked, has the jury reached a verdict? A single nod from the foreperson preceded the hammer's crack life imprisonment, no possibility of parole for Garrett Langford. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. Then Langford's face twisted into a laugh, quiet at first, then growing louder. It was not a sound of triumph, but of bitter accusation, as if his laughter exposed a deeper shame. "Label me a criminal," he declared, "but know this, I am a mirror for your failures. I am not alone." No one applauded, no one wept. Instead, the spectators bowed their heads as though collectively acknowledging, "We are not blameless." Each person's gaze searched another's, asking, "Who bears responsibility for what unfolded?" Outside the courthouse, the winter sun dipped low, casting long shadows over Washington's marble steps. Simple candles burned at a makeshift memorial for fallen troops, their flames flickering in the cold air. Officers in uniform paused to read signs held by veterans. "Justice demands more than punishment." Families gathered in silence, holding framed photos of loved ones lost to war, now laid to rest under newly erected flags. Although Langford would spend the rest of his days behind bars, the deeper reckoning had only just begun. Conversations that had long simmered beneath the surface about honor, prejudice, and accountability now bubbled into daylight. No single verdict could erase systemic wrongdoing, but in that courtroom silence, something fundamental shifted. When even those sworn to uphold the law failed, it was clear, true, justice requires more than one man's confinement. It demands that every guardian of honor be held to the same unblinking standard. Less than 6 hours after the verdict, the entire nation awoke to one question: who was Marissa Oakwood? Suddenly, American military history was rewritten. News outlets and social media reminded everyone that she was the first black four-star general to command 3 combat units, the officer who rescued 18 soldiers from a hostile prison camp in Kandahar, including a senator's son who had once opposed military diversity. Meanwhile, Garrett Langford's name began to vanish from public record. His medals were revoked, his name removed from the honor roll, and every textbook and training manual that once celebrated him was quietly recalled. Across from the Arlington Memorial rose the Wall of Apologies, a sculpture made of recycled steel panels bound together with handwritten notes from veterans, chaplains, and former colleagues, thousands of messages admitting, "We stayed silent too long." In the weeks that followed, Oakwood used her influence to advocate for sweeping changes in military training. "If one day you find yourself staring down the barrel of a gun, remember that I refuse to kneel." Those words were etched above the main gate of the Pentagon, becoming a rallying cry for a new generation of service members. Recruits now study case files on her actions rather than endless drills on protocol. Ethics classes include her story as a core lesson. Standing still can be as powerful as raising an arm. Across the country, cadets at service academies pause to read the inscription and reflect on its meaning. Sometimes all it takes to shift an entire institution is a single person who refuses to bow. In town halls and veteran centers, older soldiers share her example with younger ones, reminding them that true honor demands constant vigilance. As autumn leaves fell on Arlington's Wall of Apologies, visitors would whisper to one another. She didn't need to draw a weapon to change the system. She simply stood. That simple act, captured on a cell phone camera, became the defining moment of an era, proof that courage under fire can spark lasting reform, and that an unbowed spirit can reshape the meaning of honor for generations to come. From this story, we learn that prejudice and corrupt power can run so deep that they only get exposed when someone dares to stand tall and refuses to bow. The silent, steadfast act during the funeral shows that sometimes the only way to speak out is by holding firm in one's convictions without uttering a word. The greatest message is that justice does not arrive on its own. It must be defended and upheld by those who understand that human dignity outweighs everything else. If I were in the protagonist's place, I would continue using my influence to push for ethics and respect training at military academies, police forces, and security units. I would campaign to integrate lessons about the value of life equality and community responsibility into training curricula, so that future generations understand no weapon should ever be aimed at someone carrying out their duty. Will racism end by 2050? We cannot guarantee that, but if this story spreads widely and becomes a foundational lesson that changes mindsets in major institutions, then the chance for future generations to live in a far less biased society will be much greater. The journey is long, but every time an individual dares to stand straight, we take another step toward erasing prejudice and building a fairer community. No one knows what the future holds, but if we remain vigilant, determined, and continue to uphold human values, then by 2050, the barriers of skin color might be reduced to almost nothing. That is the hope this story inspires, that the power of righteousness and a single person's bravery can spark an awakening of conscience throughout society. Disclaimer: this story is entirely fictional. All characters and events are creations of the author and are not intended to reference or criticize any real person. It is designed to raise awareness of responsibility, justice, and the importance of treating one another with respect and dignity. We firmly oppose all forms of violence, prejudice, and injustice. Please consider this before viewing.